Almost everybody in America wants to execute somebody. We are mad as hell. Let's roll them in there, shoot them with whatever it takes, fry them, shoot them, whatever it is. And then roll the stiff right out of there. Another problem solved. Let me tell you who's here. Charlie Jones joins us. Thank you, Warden. You are warden of Holman Prison near Atmore, Alabama. You also are the man who presides over Alabama's death row. You've worked there for 23 years. How many executions have you presided over, Warden?
6.
Yeah, you don't look thrilled about it. Don Cabana's with you, a former warden, Mississippi State Penitentiary at Parchmont, as well as other facilities, former interim commissioner of corrections for Mississippi. Gas chamber execution. I got a man here to tell you that's the worst way to go.
It's not nice.
You choke, you can't breathe. I don't know. And you know, if you hang the guy and the rope is too long, it decapitates him. If it's not long enough, you know, he kind of twists there for about a minute and a half. Here is an interview I did 21 years ago from the death house at the Ohio State Penitentiary in Columbus with a reporter who witnessed an execution. Watch this.
If you see his hands there, they are strapped to the chair, to the handrest there, and it makes the hands draw up sort of like claws. And you see the where the shirt is open, you see the skin turn red like a lobster, I guess, in boiling water.
Fred Leuchter joins us. You're a leading advisor in the United States on capital punishment. You invented the lethal injection method, which is used in 4 states, so?
That is correct.
Does your mother know you're doing this work, Fred?
I assure you she does.
You're here to say, among other things, yours is the most humane, I bet you.
I think all of the procedures can be equally humane if the equipment is up to par, if it's been designed right, if it's not ancient, and if the protocol is proper.
Right. You are here to say, among other things, that a lot of the equipment is pretty ancient, isn't it? And,
yes.
And in disrepair. We've had some real horror stories, have we not? We fired electricity into a guy and he didn't die, isn't that so?
This has happened quite often. We've also had problems where we've badly burned and mutilated bodies. We've also had problems where we've actually tortured the executee for several seconds. I say several, probably 30 or 4 seconds before he passed out. The equipment has to function properly, the voltage has to be correct, or else it's going to hurt.
Yeah. So... Well, I mean, are you a proud American or not? We want our equipment to work. Let's zing it in there and kill that sucker. Nobody executes people but us and South Africa. And you ask a crowd, you ask the Rotary Club how they feel about capital punishment. You do too, don't you? You're all for this. I believe in capital punishment. We've got to kill these... Ron Wickberg, convicted of murder in 1969. That's not that long ago. Sentenced to life. I bet you're glad you don't have some of these folks on your jury.
I'd like to know how many people who are against capital punishment.
Well, the liberals are still walking around, huh? You went into a convenience store, was it? Grocery store, what was it?
It was a grocery store. Myself and 2 other men tried to rob it. The store owner pulled out a gun and fired 4 shots at us. He didn't hit anyone. He was shot 1 time in the arm. The bullet broke his arm, ricocheted into his chest, and he died 8 hours later. He bled to death.
And you fired the shot?
Yes, I did.
How old were you?
I was 26 years old. I served 25 years in prison, and I've been out of prison for 3 months right now.
You began writing in 1971 for the award-winning prison magazine, The Angleite. You joined the staff in 1987, became associate editor. One of the articles was credited with stopping the use of the electric chair in Louisiana in 1991. What's your grievance here about that, Mr. Wickberg? Now, you've been on the inside. You spent a long time in there.
Well, in our recent book, my co-editor and I, Wilbert Rideau, published, we actually published photographs of what a person looked like when he come out of the electric chair.
You bring your book out here?
It's in the dressing room.
Well, we'll get it for you.
And if everybody will take a look at these pictures, you will know that the electric chair does not work like everyone thinks it does, and it's terrible. It's mutilating, it's burning, it's terrible.
Warden, how do you think, what do you think as you listen in on us there from Alabama?
That's not, what he's telling is not correct. If it's done right, there's no body damage.
And you're, you have an electric chair, do you, Warden?
Yes.
How many volts?
It's 2 cycles. It's 2200 the first time, and it's 950 the second cycle.
Mm-hmm. You shave the man's head and you put a suction cup on top?
A helmet similar to a cup, yes. And he has a ankle bracelet.
Yeah. I assume you've gotten pretty close to some of these folks as you served as warden. I mean, it had to happen, didn't it, Warden?
Well, the average length of time on death row before a sentence is complete averages at least 10 years. So if you work at a prison where there's a death row, you're going to get to know them.
Yeah. So you're here to say this is no picnic. You didn't choose this as part of your job, but it goes with your responsibility, and you work for the state, and you're going to do it. How am I doing?
Well, that's correct.
You know, Phil, Alabama has one of the most botched executions in the history of this country. The man literally burned up, and he wasn't killed yet.
That's so, isn't it, Warden?
That's so, but it's not from equipment malfunction. It's from human error. I was part of one of the executions that was botched, and it was not from the equipment. It was totally a human error.
What happened, Warden?
The equipment was not hooked up correctly.
So instead of getting a straight shot, it kind of just skittled off the top of his head then. Well,
after extensive investigations by electrical engineers, electronic experts, we found that no voltage reached the chair.
No voltage reached the chair. So the guy didn't get hit with anything then?
The first time he did not.
So how did he finally get killed then?
We had to do it again.
And did you have to rearrange the helmet?
No, it was a matter of hooking up the jacks into the right plugs.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, it sounds like me trying to put my VCR into my tape recorder. What do you want to say here, Don? I'm sorry, okay. Fred, you wanted to say, you're the one who's just brought a consumer report on the equipment that we use to kill people here, and it's not a very positive one. You saying we got old equipment and that nobody really wants to pass a bill to, it's kind of ghoulish, and it sits in disrepair. It's used on isolated occasions, although more frequently of late, and you're not surprised by this story then?
No, it's an expensive proposition. The equipment in Alabama shouldn't have been designed in such a fashion that it would have allowed for the chair to be improperly connected. And I do have to disagree with Warden Jones. Everything we see indicates that there was some voltage passed. Whether or not there was enough voltage to hurt...
On the first shot?
Yes. Whether or not there was enough voltage to hurt, we don't know.
Well, Warden, did you see the body move after the first jolt?
No.
So you stand by your story. He didn't get hit with anything on the first shot?
He did not get hit with anything. Mr. Leuchter is making an assessment. He wasn't even there. He's making an assessment that really you don't know anything about.
Well, witnesses do report that there was movement.
There was movement in the body at the first shot.
This is what we have to rely on.
On what witnesses you talk to. If you talk to somebody that opposes the death penalty, I'm sure you're going to hear a different story than someone who's trying to be down the middle of the road and do what is supposed to be done.
Ron Wick. So go ahead, Warden.
And I know for a fact that no voltage reached the chair during the first attempt.
Well, when did he burn? He burned on the second shot. They gave him another hit. Here are some of the photographs to which Mr. Wickberg referred a moment ago. As you can see there on the right, there's considerable surface damage to the skull as caused by the electric voltage that has passed through the inmate on the occasion
That's
of
the
his...
way, Bill, that's the way the body was sent home to the mother and the father of the person who was executed.
Okay. Also here is Reginald Vaughn, a Chicagoan. This is your second appearance on our program, Mr. Vaughn. You were with us 11 years ago. We put an ad in a paper asking for volunteers, people who would like to be involved in an execution. You know, if you'd like to either electrocute somebody, shoot somebody, poison somebody, gas somebody, then we asked you to give us a call. And you did, Mr. Vaughn, among others. Tell us why you would be respond to that
Well,
kind
I've heard every excuse in the world, you know, about from the liberals, or why we shouldn't do it. You know, the guy was depraved on the kind of, he's deprived and stuff like that, you know,
Yeah.
and let him off this time or anything. But nobody's ever answered questions about what to do with him. Stick him in jail for the rest of his life? You know, he kills another person, what are you going to do with him, you know, or what? And I believe that, you know, the victim's family has no respect for the law because this guy sits in jail 14, 15 years, like Gacy. You know, and the victim has no respect for the law because he's able to misuse the courts and get away with, literally with murder.
Well, you are stalwart, you are steadfast in your belief, and here's what you said 11 years ago on this very program, Mr. Vaughn. Researcher on capital punishment is looking for volunteer executioners. Contact that box number. Reggie, you answer the ad, why?
Well, I believe in capital punishment. I don't think that whoever murders anybody, or maliciously especially, you know, has the right to live. You know, you lose your right to live in our society.
And you would actually pull the switches?
Right. I see no. I mean, you volunteer for everything else. You know, it's the same as working in a hospital.
How do you respond to those who say that a disproportionate number of black people are executed?
Well, it's true because a disproportionate number of black people are killing other black people. If you allow them to live, that's genocide.
Here are, we'll take you to school here on this issue of execution, which, capital punishment. Sometimes split families. This is not unlike the abortion issue in terms of the emotional shockwave that it's generated. Here we go. This will just take a moment. This audience wants in here. U.S. execution facts. States with the death penalty, how many? 36. Of which 20 kill their condemned men or women by lethal injection. 11 use electrocution, 6 use lethal gas, 2 use firing squad, and 2 use hanging. Do you know who uses the firing squad?
Utah.
Utah, that's 1. Gary Gilmore, let's do it. Kaboom! They shot him right in the heart. Idaho. Idaho will shoot you. I think you get your choice, don't you? Don't you get a choice? Can you hang in either of those 2 states as well?
No, you cannot.
Where can you hang?
Washington State, Montana, and Delaware.
All right, we have only 2, so we'll leave that discrepancy aside for a moment. Number of executions since 1977 when the Supreme Court, remember, 1976 decision said, I think it wasn't cruel and unusual. We have executed since 1977 184 people, 27 of whom were sent to their maker in the year of our Lord, 1992. That's a record breaker? In 1 year? Well, we're doing something right here in America. We hold the record. But we have at least one man on our program, Mr. Vaughn, who's a little fed up with the liberals walking out there, oh, bleeding heart, let's keep them for the rest of their lives. Costs you at least, how much a year for a prisoner?
I beg your pardon?
At least
$50,000, let's say.
50.
Yeah, okay, you could do it a whole lot cheaper, whatever ComEd wanted to charge you for.
All right, I have to break here. Do you want to know the race breakout of defendants executed? 55% of those executed since '97 have been white. 39% black. That is significantly disproportionate to the percentage of African Americans in our culture. 5.5% Hispanic, 1 Native American, and yes, we have killed 1 female. What do you think about this? A.J. Bannister is a death row inmate at the Potosi Correctional Center in Missouri. He is on death row, and we have the permission of the Discovery Channel to show you a piece of their program which premieres on November 1st. Can be seen, I am pleased to recommend this to your attention, from 8 to 10 p.m. It is titled, on the Discovery Channel, The Execution Protocol. Here's a death row inmate. Here's how he wants to go.
Myself, if I've got to go, I would prefer it be by the most gruesome method going, which at that time was the gas chamber in the state of Missouri. Not because I'm any glutton for punishment, but on the pretense, the hope, that it would affect people to read a newspaper account afterwards of how my eyes bulged out, my tongue got swollen, I turned black in the face, that I choked for 11 minutes. That has an effect on the public. It doesn't help me, but it might help someone down the line to wake the public up to the fact that it's murder.
What's the matter?
I feel really bad, like, listening to everybody show these pictures of how everybody that's being put to death is tortured and punished. But how about the pictures of the mothers receiving their kids that have been tortured and mutilated by these people?
I don't see any justification in taking a life for a life. I feel that if that person is placed in prison for the rest of his natural life, he'll have to live with that, and that is not solving any of the problems by taking that person's life.
10 years ago,
what about when we support the prisoner for his whole life, $50,000 a year? Wouldn't it be better to put him in an education school where he could learn not to kill?
Well,
Yeah.
I think that it seems that we are concerned mainly with the price of keeping this person in jail. I think that should be secondary. I think we should think about the person himself, not how much it costs, not base people's lives on whether I should keep you alive because it's cheaper or to kill you because it's cheaper.
I think we're spending too much money on the prisoners and not enough on our schools and education and teaching people what's right.
Well, I had a question for the warden. I wanted to know, I've heard this, I don't know the legal status on it, that if you're not killed the first time, you're presumed innocent. Is that correct?
No, that's not true.
Certainly wasn't true in Alabama.
No, if our procedures in Mississippi were very simply, if something were to happen that the execution process failed the first time, then we would simply clear the gas chamber and reinstitute the procedures and do it again.
You've done several gas executions. May we have your feelings about this issue? Former Warden Cabana, Mississippi State Penitentiary at Parchmont, please.
Well, it's frankly, for prison staff who have to become involved with executions, it is a very stressful, emotionally wrenching process. And whether you personally believe in the necessity of capital punishment or not, the wardens do their jobs. Frankly, it's not something that most wardens look forward to. And yes, you do become close to some of these prisoners. I think that the real issue here is that the American public needs to be able to make informed decisions about this process. And the only way to do that is through more education.
Yeah. In that connection, Warden, you've deftly stayed off any public position on the issue. Many wardens, on the occasion of their retirement, come out against capital punishment. I'm sure you know that. It's a difficult thing to pop off about when you're working for the state, and we understand that. You guys can't go out there and preach. But you are a retired warden now. In fact, to your credit, you teach criminology at the University of Southern Mississippi, so? Well, would you mind sharing with us, is this a good idea, Warden?
I think I probably fall into that vast majority of wardens who over the decades, having been the first-hand purveyors of this process, who find themselves opposed to it in the sense that hopefully there's a better way to solve our worst problems. There's two things that are important here, Phil. One, the issue of cost. And unfortunately, the arguments about capital punishment sometimes come down to cost. Very clearly, from a pragmatic standpoint, executing a prisoner is an extremely costly venture, and if he lives to be 80 years old in prison and dies there an old man, we have not spent the money on him that we will trying to execute. And the legal appeals are extremely costly. Second, when we execute somebody, what we say then is that there's not one spark of good left that we can find in this person. And there may well be people like that, but I think that's an issue that we have to keep in mind and have to address. And I want to say, those of us who are closest to this process never lose sight of the victims and the victims' family. This is a difficult, emotional question all the way around. And finally, I want to correct a statement that Reggie made earlier. Black people in this country do not go to death row for killing blacks. They go to death row for killing almost anybody except blacks.
That is the truth. From the Discovery Channel, and then this audience, I promise you, will get you in here. The program is called The Execution Protocol, which is based on a book of the same name, airs November 1st. Thank you, Discovery Channel, for allowing us to use this piece of your documentary featuring Doyle Williams, who was 3 hours to an execution before the phone rang. Watch this.
I don't really know how to express what people do, but when they're about to kill you, they just seem very, very nervous. They seem like they can't stand still. They make idle conversation that's just, you know, how's the weather would be complex, I think, conversation for them. They seem very, very uncomfortable about what they're fixing to do, but at the same time, they seem anxious to do it. I didn't quite understand why they wanted to, you know, why these particular individuals, and they seem to take some satisfaction in thinking, well, we're about to kill you. I don't know. And then, like I say, then finally the phone call come to them, and I heard them announce over the radio system they call it stand down from the exercise. And there was obvious disappointment on their faces when that happened.
Phil? I'd like to say I wouldn't want to kill my own cow to make my own hamburger either. I agree that capital punishment is gruesome. Every method they have is painful or gruesome. You hang a guy, the rope can break. You know, he can slowly strangle. You execute him, he can cook. You know, or you give him the lethal injection. It is painful when I've read. The painkiller does not always work. Right. But it's just like anything else. You know, nobody's ever answered the question, what are you going to do if the guy kills again in jail, second time, you know? It's always, you know, let him up. And statistics I've read from the FBI contradict you, because the biggest thing they have in Chicago, especially, is black on black crime. We've got the biggest thing in the world against that. They're trying to get...
Black on black crime is a very serious issue, but it does not account for the percentage of executions that black on white crime.
What I'm saying is most murders occurred by somebody who's close with you, you know, a drug dealer, and his user or whatever, something like that. And that's what, so it is a black person killing another black.
Very good. How many people, I'll give you a chance here, how many people on death row today? You're paying for them, you should know this.
2,000.
How many people on death row, waiting to meet their makers? 300.
2,600 and something.
1,000. 4,000. Show them, Brian. There are 2,588 people on death row right now. The average time on death row is 7.2 years. You've already heard from Mr. Cabana that the money meter is ticking on a death row inmate in a much more accelerated pace than would be the case of a lifer or another prison inmate. It is true that by the time you get the depositions, the filings, all the appeals, lots of money is spent, and most of it is public funding. And we'll be back in just a moment. We are talking about capital punishment. Since America is now dispatching people with the advice and consent of the state in greater numbers than ever before, we are looking at how we kill our death row inmates, how efficient it is, who gets killed, where are we, how about the technology? Who wanted to say? Fred, did you want to say something?
Yes.
You're a leading advisor in the United States on capital punishment. You invented the lethal injection method, which is used in 4 states. Sir.
I wanted to indicate that I think we're losing sight of the actual condition. We talked about blacks killing whites or whites killing blacks or what have you. This has nothing to do with the issue. The man is on death row for killing another human being. And the victims of that original crime are not only the family and the victim of the actual crime, but the inmate who was executed, the inmate's family who was executed, the warden and all of the prison officials who have to conduct that execution, and in some cases, the people in this room, you and me, and our society in general. We have to remember that everybody is the victim of the original crime.
Yes, we do remember that. The question is whether remembering that should move us in conscience to take the irredeemable step of ending his life. Warden Jones, did you want in here? You're the man in the trenches, so to speak, right now, as the warden of the Holman prison near Atmore, Alabama. You're listening in on us thoughtfully. I should give you a chance to jump in here.
Well, I don't know what more I could say more than what Mr. Cabana had said earlier as far as getting to know these people. Once they have been there 8 or 10 years, the fact that what you have to remember, I think, is whether or not you believe in capital punishment or not, you have to keep in mind that there's no one on death row that I personally investigated or arrested. I didn't sit in judgment on them. In effect, didn't send for these people. I have to try to do what I'm supposed to do based on the rules and regulations and the laws of this state.
Right. Warden, I assume Alabama provides a last meal for your executionees?
They do.
And that's a meal of the prisoner's choice?
His choice based on what we have accessible to us in our kitchen.
But I mean, it's more than a Big Mac, I think.
More than a what?
It's more than a Big Mac.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So most of them probably steak and potatoes then, huh?
Well, we have had that request, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And who gets to see the prisoner prior? What are the prisoner's options regarding visitors on the last day of his life?
In Alabama, we allow the inmate during the last week to visit extensively, almost to his choice, ever how long he would like to visit, and between the hours of 8 a.m. and 3 or 4 p.m. It's basically left up to the inmate.
And I assume there's no privacy during those meetings.
It's a contact visit, but it's in an open, monitored, very secure visiting yard.
Mm-hmm. And how many people is the executionee permitted to choose to witness his death?
The inmate had a choice of no more than 4. We let 3 members of the press in, the Holman chaplain, 2 doctors, the commissioner, and a spiritual advisor of the inmate if he has one.
I'd be curious to know if any of the panelists know the number of innocent people put to death over the years.
Yes, you wanted to say. Former prisoner Wickberg.
It's a good question. Thank you, Phil. There was a book recently written by Dr. Michael Radley from the University of Florida at Gainesville, where he and a fellow professor have documented 28 innocent people executed since 1930.
Which state executes the most people? I'm telling you, if you people don't start doing your homework, I don't know what we're going to do. Who executes the most people? Texas. Oh, I want to be as smart as this audience. Now, let me just show them. Here you go. Texas, all-time indoor champion. 52 people have died in Texas, most, I think, by injection. That's 28% of all the executions since '77. Florida, you're second. Louisiana is third. Virginia is fourth, and Georgia is fifth. And we'll be back in just a moment. Brian, show them the victims by race. That is to say, executionees by race. I'm sorry, the race of the victims. Don't miss the point here. These, of all the executions, 84% of those who were executed killed a white person. We don't know exactly how many of those 201 were white or black, but this is interesting. We appear to be more offended by the killing of a white person. 31 executions have taken place because the person who was condemned killed a black person. The victims, yes, the victims were white. Killed white victims. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. The percentage of the total numbers of victims, of people who've been executed, these are the percentages. I apologize for the confusion. Yes.
I wanted to ask Mr. Whitberg, you being in the prison for so long, you probably get a feeling for the prison system and everything. If you're against the death penalty, what would be, what do you think is the answer for overcrowding and money spent on prisons?
Well, I don't believe executing people to solve our overcrowding problem is the answer. However, for the past 12 years, we've had 23,000 homicides in America every year. Last year, we had 24,000 homicides. Of these 23,000 homicides, we've only put 200 people on death row each year. And of the 200 people we put on death row, how many did we execute? 12. If we're going to be fair, why execute 12 people for committing 24,000 homicides? Either execute all of them or don't execute any of them.
He has your support, does he, Mr. Yes, Warden Cabana, please. Please.
The whole death penalty process, the way it functions now, is a crapshoot. It's a big lottery. And when you have 25,000 homicides a year, since the McCleskey decision reinstated the death penalty 16 years ago, you now have 2,500 people on death row. Multiply 25,000 homicide victims a year by 16 years, and you see what a game of chance it is.
I have a question. I don't understand why the criminals get to pick their last meal and get to pick their visitors, and the victims, they don't get to say goodbye to whoever they want, and they don't get to pick their last meal.
Warden, what do you say down there in Alabama? Incidentally, Warden, I tell you nothing when I say that Alabama is 6th. We named the top 5 states in terms of numbers of executions. You are 6. You've had 9 executions since 76, since 77. That's 5% of the total. Why all this deference to the condemned man?
In Alabama, it's the law. To answer her question, as far as the last meal is concerned, it's Alabama law.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question as to, oh, well, first of all, what is the time element between when the first electrical shock is given and the second one? And why was the second one administered to this person when the first one did not work? And then I have another comment.
Well, we've got lots of people on it. Warden?
I'm not sure I understood.
Why, you know, what's the distance between the 2 jolts of electricity under a normal execution procedure in your state? You've told us that you hit the victim with 2 jolts of electricity.
Currently, it's a 120-second cycle. 2 jolts of electricity. The first jolt is 20 seconds, 2,200 volts. The second one takes up after that 950 volts for 100 seconds.
Yeah. Why do you hit them with less first and more second?
It's more first and less second.
Oh, it's more first.
The first jolt.
The what? The first jolt.
The first jolt is the large jolt, which renders the brain dead. The second one is longer, less voltage to shut down the other functions, heart, and so on.
Yes. Why do you think it should be backwards, Fred Leuchter?
Well, simply because there's a problem with fibrillation in the heart, and it's been known for over 100 years that the heart fibrillates with low voltages. The second jolt must be in excess of 2,000 volts, accounting for the 10% voltage drop, or you're always going to run the risk of the individual's heart restarting some 10, 15, or 20 minutes later. And this has been seen in any number of executions.
Literally coming back from the dead, huh?
Yes.
Is this, I assume this is no longer used?
No, this was used to execute 63 people.
And they even burned a hole in the screen on the top of this thing. So you put this on first, put this on, attach this...
It's come apart. It's actually one piece. This sponge is wet with saline solution, salt water. It's strapped to the person's head. The top electrode is connected to the output from the transformer.
Yeah. And what's this?
This is the same thing, but it's not as effective. This is the type of equipment that's being used today. That type of equipment should be used. And that's older.
You mean a full skull helmet?
Yes. That's older than this, but most of the states are torturing people with this, and they're torturing people with this leg electrode.
Why, what does that do? Just gives you, it's painful, but not lethal.
It's the ground, but you need 2 electrodes, and they must be affixed to the chair. This slides down the victim's leg. And I say victim because that's why they have so many botched executions, so much burning, and so much pain.
And this is what, not enough surface to get it in there?
Yes, yes.
And this is what they're using now?
Yes. And what we must always remember is that the society has declared these individuals' lives forfeit, not their humanity. We're human beings, and we must treat them the same throughout the entire process.
What?
I have a question for the convicted killer. You said that it is not fair that so many people are on death row, other people are not on death row. Could you please justify the word fair?
I think that the general public needs, they have the right to expect our criminal justice system to be fair. You expect people to come out of prison a little bit better than the day they went in. To be fair, if you're going to execute a killer, execute all the killers, or don't execute any of them.
What is fair? You took a life. What is fair?
My victim's family recommended that I be released for parole. And I think that says an awful lot, that there's a lot of people in America that believe this way. We believe in second chances in America.
Well, it takes a special person to that family because, God forbid, if it was one of my children, I'd be sick and I could never live my life to the fullest. And I really don't like the death penalty, but if it was one of my children that was behind that counter, I would want to see you dead. And I'm sorry to say that.
And we'll be back in just a minute. We said that Texas is killing more people than any other state. Here's how they do it. On our visit to Huntsville, Texas, home of their maximum security prison, the place of the room where they inject the death row inmate who has lost all appeals. Here's what it looked like when we televised it in 1983. Here is the IV post on which a neutral solution is placed to be fed into the body of the condemned criminal until the order from the warden is given. That order, prescribed by Texas code, is simply, "We are ready." At which time an unidentified executioner places a syringe into an opening into the IV tube and inserts the lethal solution. Reporters who witnessed the execution of Charlie Brooks say that he, on being told that by the warden that he could make a final statement, confirmed that he wanted to. He raised his head, looked at the woman he loved who was standing behind the railing, and he said, "I love you." After which he chanted in Arabic from the Quran his belief that he was about to be delivered to Allah. After the order for the lethal solution to be inserted into the tubing that went to his body, witnesses said Charlie Brooks turned his head to the left and then to the right, then up again, and then to the left, as if to say no. They say his final sound resembled a ah. There's a debate about whether he was calling out the name of Allah or whether this was an involuntary response of his body's reaction to the lethal solution. His stomach heaved, and after he had opened and closed his fists 2 or 3 times, his fingers began to tremble. And at 12:16 a.m., 7 minutes after the lethal solution was inserted into the tubing, Charlie Brooks was dead. They doing it right?
No, they're not. They need a machine. The application of the solutions for lethal injection by hand are even too difficult for medical personnel to do. And the proper procedure would require a machine that introduces the fluids at a pressure and at a rate that they will not damage any of the veins.
I'd like to know what this gentleman, Charlie Brooks, did in order to receive the death sentence, because my ability to feel sympathy for him, as well as my ability to pull the switch, would directly be affected.
Some information about this crime. I agree. Yes.
I have a question for Reginald in particular. I understand with the warden, he's following the law in his state, but as a private citizen wanting to be a hired gun to perform this kind of work. I mean, it just amazes me that...
Why would he want to do it?
For 12 years now, that is how he feels he can be productive in society. I don't see the need to add to this kind of killings.
I'll give him a chance to answer uninterrupted in a moment. Rage and Survival Behind Bars is the account of Ron Wickberg, who was a lifer and has been recently paroled and steps out to say, among other things, that he's against the death penalty. You wanted to say, Reggie, you were...
No offense, but I consider the death penalty a necessary evil. It's not a matter of anything pleasurable or anything like that. But people have learned to play games with the courts. The society has no respect for the law. The criminals have no respect for the law. And they're going to do what they want.
I'm sorry, although I'm for the death penalty, I find it amazing that we still hang people and shoot them. I just...
Yeah, I think we've sort of confused. There's two issues. It seems like it's capital punishment and then a form.
Right.
So you've sort of defended one against the other when it's almost two issues.
Yes?
I want to commend the wardens because in order to do your job, it's very hard. You're making money. You're sitting here and somebody took sympathy on you and you're making lots of money off of it. And that's wrong. You're making money off of these pumps that you're hanging, that you're pretending like this is the most...
Well, somebody's got to make the equipment.
What I'm saying, he's
Would
sitting
you
here saying
rather people
everything's
be
nice.
tortured? Do you want to take the responsibility for the poor people that are tortured?
that I don't like, but I have to do them.
So does he.
You know, and you're making it seem like yours is the best method. It isn't.
It is, I assure you.
Should we televise the executions?
Yes. Yes, said the host. I mean, if it's a deterrent, let's show the people. Let's see them gasp. Let's see the eyes bulge out. I don't think the wardens agree, however. No. Negative from both.
My comment is to Reggie. I think that talk is cheap, and if it came right down to it, you really couldn't kill anyone.
I told you my history, you changed your mind.
Yeah.
I think it's quite natural that a prisoner would want to be against the death penalty.
Yes.
I am a brand new Christian, so I don't know the biblical view on this, but I don't know if anybody would care to find out what the biblical view on
The
this.
Old Testament allows capital punishment.
Sir, you wanted to say.
Why don't they put them to death the way their victims were put to death?
Same way. Yes.
I think it's great that women are totally underrepresented in this entire panel.
You're talking about torture. What do you think he did to the other family?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all focusing on the ways to kill people. How about preventing people from getting guns in the first place?
Good idea. Yes, sir.
I would like to know how would y'all feel if your family would need the lethal injection?
We'll talk about. Of the 5 states that execute the most people in the United States of America, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Virginia, Georgia, and Alabama, all are in the South.
And Phil?
Fred, tell us. I'm sorry, I want you in here, Ron, excuse me.
If we were to execute every one of them that are now on death row, we would have to execute 7 every day for this next year. But if we executed all 23,000...
500.
We say we convict all
of murders, yes.
23,000.
Yes.
We have to execute 74 every day.
Services provided and promotional fees paid by the following.